The bad news don't stop. 7 years after the Brexit referendum, the British automotive industry is on the rocks, and the forecasts for English patients give little reason for optimism. It was something like a call for help from the intensive care unit. Almost begging, the British automotive industry asked the EU at the end of July last year already for a postponement of the Brexit tariffs on electric cars, which are to apply from 2024. And that with good reason, because the increasing demands on the local share of value creation within Great Britain or the EU will hardly be able to be met. And these barriers could even deal the death blow to English patients ahead of the most important export market for the few remaining plants on the island. That's what experts fear. And it's not for nothing that former Nissan and Aston Martin boss Andy Palmer is already warning of the loss of 800,000 jobs. But why is the British car industry in crisis? England used to be something like the aircraft carrier of Europe's coast and a real threat to car manufacturers on the continent. What says that it's quite a descent now. That was an expert referring to factories such as Honda in Swindon or Nissan in Sunderland. But with Brexit, the decline has begun that can hardly be stopped. And the numbers prove him right. While the British were still building 1.7 million cars in 2016, the year of the referendum, in 2022 was only 775,000, and thus 10% less than even the year before. And he sees the reason for this not only in the more difficult logistics with longer terms and higher costs, in endless bureaucracy and new hurdles in what used to be borderless trade. Instead, the main culprit is the constantly self-reinforcing downward spiral. In this problematic environment, manufacturers are finding it very difficult to make production decisions and the long-term investments required for them, he says. And every decision for a plant in another country, even every publicly expressed doubt, such as that recently expressed by Stellantis boss Carlos Tavares, shakes the confidence of the suppliers, who need it in the vicinity of the plants for a stable automotive industry. Because with a few remaining factories in the country and the shrinking production, it is difficult to feed the suppliers or to persuade them to invest in new plants and locations. But the threatening risk is the rules of origin clause in the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And that was also emphasized by Philip Dunn, a partner at Roland Berger in London. He states that from January 2024, at least 45% of the parts of an electric vehicle assembled in the UK must also come from there or the EU, and otherwise exports to the EU will be subject to a 10% tariff. And that could get expensive, because currently 80% of British production is exported, and more than half of it to the EU. A tariff of 10% would make assembly in Great Britain unprofitable, says Dunn, believing that many international manufacturers would then move away or not come to England at all. The problem here is the batteries, which account for 40 to 60% of the vehicle's value. And there are currently no production facilities or even gigafactories for them in the UK, nor a realistic plan for their construction. Some manufacturers are now trying to do this on their own, but none of these projects will create an industrialized supply source for batteries before 24. However, the EU is also behind schedule with its plans, so that the renegotiation of the current agreement is in the interest of all parties. That's why Dunn is optimistic there. Not least because of this, Dunn does not give up on the English patient and hopefully quotes current statistics. Commercial vehicle production is at its highest level in 10 years, he says, and car production is also increasing again, although it's still well below the level ahead of the pandemic. Overall, the prospects for most brands are good. The FTSE 100 suppliers are also in a strong position, as are the large dealer groups. Another expert also sees a few location advantages. The language and the legal system, for example, are much closer to the Americans in England than in continental Europe. And of course, an immigrant would rather go to London than to Ljubljana. Whether Stellantis will carry out its threat and withdraw the Vauxhall production from England, like the electric Mini from China will affect the plant in Oxford, how long Ford will remain loyal to the British, and how Nissan will continue in Sunderland, nobody dares to make a prognosis, none of the experts. But at least two niches don't have to worry about it. Brands like Rolls-Royce, Bentley and Aston Martin are hard to imagine for people without the Made in England label. And the British House of Lords protection of existence, just like a few premium suppliers for leather or luxury accessories. But with a total of not even 50,000 units per year, no industry can be fed. This may be important for prestige, but for the overall production, these brands are rather secondary. And even smaller, but possibly even more valuable, is the Formula One industry, which is almost exclusively centered in Great Britain, because a lot of know-how is generated there, from which the manufacturers on that side of the channel also benefit, even if only a few developments from Formula One fertilize the production vehicles. It's just stupid that even 10 F1 teams only have about 10,000 people employed, which is not really compensation for closed large-scale production plants. But I also have to give you an update on another topic that many of us have been anticipating that has nothing to do with the cars. Because new videos of politicians at lockdown celebration have surfaced in London. I talked about this in a video. And that's quite spicy because presumably there's also a man who worked on the investigation report on the party sinners and the parliament misleader Boris Johnson. The police in the British capital have reopened investigations into illegal lockdown parties in the government district. As Scotland Yard announced on Tuesday evening, it is about an event on December 14th in 2020. A recently made public video recording showed the team of the then Conservative mayoral candidate for London, Sean Bailey, celebrating, exuberantly. An event in Parliament on December 8th, 2020 is also to be determined, as the police report said. According to one report, there was said to have been a birthday celebration in Parliament. And the spicy stuff about it is, a sharp inner party critic of ex-Prime Minister Johnson, Sir Bernard Jenkin, is said to have taken part. A few weeks ago, a committee to which Jenkin belongs reprimanded Johnson for lying in Parliament about the Partygate affair. And according to the Commission's report, Johnson was the first Prime Minister to deliberately mislead the House of Commons. The violations were so serious that Johnson, if he had still been a member of Parliament, would be excluded from parliamentary session in Westminster for 90 days. Johnson only escaped such a suspension because he had previously resigned his mandate. And Johnson had previously discredited the test results or the commission results as garbage and spoke of a witch hunt against himself. I believed correctly that these events were reasonably necessary for work purposes, is what the ex-premier said of the Corona time meetings in question. A total of 126 penal orders were issued for illegal celebrations in the government district during Johnson's tenure. And that's also confirmed by Scotland Yard. Johnson and the current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also received penalties. However, Johnson had long denied any wrongdoing in Parliament. And meanwhile, reports of other banned gatherings of Johnson, which were investigated by the police, did not lead to a new investigation. But now we have some, and so that's why I had to include them in the video today to give you an update on this, because we talked about these, at least one of those parties, and we talked about the Commission report earlier. Two things I have to mention again. First of all, this time I didn't forget it. You already find the announcement for the next live stream on my channel. And secondly, thank you again to those who support my creation of my new channel, Outside Views STFC, why you always see the banner up there. So I received some more support, and I really want to say thank you for that. Every small contribution helps, and there is a lot to do still, so I'm really grateful for everyone doing this. And if you want to see something long before the live stream, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.